at the end, he said he always thought that marketing was about advertising. Get your advertising right. You've got to get your advertising out there. And said he learned after going through the process with us of going, well, he's worked out that marketing is about understanding your market.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't understand your market, there's no point trying to market to them because you're going to market wrong. You're going to miss the target. You're going to miss the target segments. You're not going to say the right things. So to me, it's really research is about avoiding waste and being much more precise and clear and confident in your innovation, in your marketing, in your strategy.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Growth Trust podcast series. In today's podcast, we focus on the importance of market research in growing a business. There's not much point making and selling what you think is a great product or service if you haven't asked the marketplace what they think about it. This Growth Trust podcast series focuses on the issues facing many small and medium business enterprises that play such an important role in the Australian economy. In fact, the latest figures show small businesses contributed more than $500 billion to the local economy, equivalent to a third of the nation's GDP. This Growth Trust podcast is brought to you by the Australian Centre for Business Growth, which was established by the University of South Australia almost a decade ago. Today we're chatting with Jason Dunstone from Square Holes, a company specialising in market research that's often pivotal to the ongoing success of many of our major brands. During this conversation, we may sample a little chocolate when exploring where Jason has done research, and with me in the studio, the Director of the Australian Centre for Business Growth, Ryan Williams. Well, firstly to you, Jason, take us back to the beginning of Square Holes. How did it all begin?
I'd been working in market research for, I'm thinking back now, maybe about 10 years. Moved back to Adelaide about 6 years before I sort of started thinking about Square Holes. And I think it's like a lot of businesses really. You think, well, I think I could do this better. I think there's opportunities to reframe it. I think in the work we do at the time, research was seen as we do surveys. We call people at night. We're annoying. And I thought, wow, it's just so interesting, the research we do. And I think we could reposition this. So I think and I had been working in research and had some interesting projects. And I think I was always entrepreneurial. My mum sort of goes back and says, when I was a kid, I always had lots of ideas. And I thought that was sort of just sat there. I think it really was about trying to create something. I think that's always been in my mind. Then sort of started working out how to best do that, really, and sort of how to create our vision of this industry. I found very interesting.
Who were some of your first clients?
We were lucky that we had done fair bit of work for government, the SA government in particular, and I know I was a nice young man, and we had done a lot of behaviour change research, and they were quite supportive, anything from behaviour change around quitting smoking to road safety, a lot of testing of ideas and looking at those behaviour change things from a government perspective. We also did a lot of commercial. I think one of our first clients was around for Orlando, Wyndham, around whiskey and new whiskey kind of opportunities. So they certainly go from anti-smoking to whiskey. They were sort of some of the earlier clients. Really quite broad. We had a lot of property development, really any clients that were there. But certainly we were really grateful for the support we had from some of those, I guess, government and broader commercial clients that really supported us right from the start. And I had been working elsewhere, and I certainly didn't entice clients to come across, but they came across quite happily, and they all sort of they found out we'd started a new business, and they were quite keen to be part of what we were creating.
Do you find that sometimes small entrepreneurs are so consumed by their business, their little baby, that sometimes they can't think outside the box and think about the need to get someone to explain to a broader audience why this product is so worthwhile buying?
And I wonder if that's sort of why some people start a business, because they can explain it in a clearer way.
Yeah.
But why a lot of sectors, whether it's research or wine, consumer products, retail, a lot of the disruption often comes from outside of the sector because the sector's so caught up in the rules of the sector, really. I guess that's maybe even just thinking back. I hadn't really thought about it too much, but I think a lot of, like having that outsider's perspective to think, well, how can we look at this differently?
Because I've found sometimes when doing training with people, especially business people, they can get so consumed with their business that when you ask them what it is that you do, it's a difficult question for them to get their heads around sometimes, because they haven't really thought how to present the narrative to a broader audience. That's really where an organisation such as yours, a company like yours, really comes into its own, doesn't it?
That's right. I think it's you. I think it's the challenge of even having that vision of knowing what you're looking to create as a business, but that reality of it's never easy. I wouldn't have thought for most businesses, unless you've got all your systems and it's just sort of just ticking along, and you're lucky to have a business that has perpetual motion. But I don't think that exists too often. I don't know. I certainly think a consistent pattern we find, again, whether it's commercial or whether it's government, that there can be very much of an inward-facing perspective on a business, and not necessarily always taking a wider perspective of where do we sit in the world and how do we adjust to changes. And that seems to be getting harder and harder, like certainly with the last few years of change and economic meltdown and global issues. It seems to be more of a challenge. I think businesses are maybe taking more notice that we can't keep on doing the same things like we always have. But yeah, it is hard. It's hard running a business.
I've seen it with technical founders and entrepreneurs, where they get so wrapped up and they're so excited by the product or the technology or the sector, and you watch them engaging with the customer, and all they want to do is spend an hour talking about this great thing that they've built or this great solution that they've got, and spend no time listening to what the customer needs, wants, and values. And when you allow the customer that space to express that, all of a sudden it's like a light bulb goes off for the entrepreneur, and their business changes. I mean, I think about one recently last year that one of my colleagues at the Centre for Business Growth worked with, went from quite patchy sales form to 3 or 4 deals in rapid succession, just by dialing back their obsession and maybe it's like a safety net, right? Where this is what I know well, and so I'm happy talking about that. And I may not know so well what you need, and so I don't really want to talk about that. And I think that's one of the central things that, from my perspective, research has played an important role in helping to understand actually what's the customer behavior, what's the customer need, what's the customer value, whether that's inside the organization, talking about culture. I know you've got a lane or a niche in sort of the culture piece, because your staff are also customers of the organization in one way, shape or form. They give of their time to be there. And so understanding their needs and their wants and their values out of their workforce, their workspace, is just as important.
So what sort of questions do you ask of a new client when they come to meet you and they say, I need market research, I need to help with marketing? You must have some standard basic questions that start the process.
I think sometimes it's really just a conversation around understanding where they're at. And many of our clients started off, they really hadn't done research, or they had a preconceived notion about what research is, or it felt negative, or it was just surveys. I think the way I articulate it is successful businesses come from like an innate curiosity, that they're curious and they're ever curious. They're looking at new ways, how a sector's changing, what's happening outside of that sector. So often the questions that I'm having with organisations is really understanding what are their pain points that they're facing, but how do they drive forward? What are those, I guess, the rules that they face as a business? What makes them them? And sometimes it's really they're not even really completely aware of where those pain points might be. Often we get people reaching out, they want a understand their customers better or have a customer journey, looking at some new products. So sometimes they might be quite clearly aligned. I think the biggest opportunity is organisations that maybe don't even know where to start. So sometimes it's really having those conversations around understanding the business more.
Yeah.
And then really where, I guess, understanding beyond their organisation, whether it's their customers, their broader market, where it might help.
But it's interesting though, isn't it, that you've got these people who are very passionate about a particular product. They make this product. They're very, they're proud of it. Yet they don't necessarily know what the audience think of it. And that's where you come in.
You're right. Yeah, you're exactly right. Maybe it's we're all humans, so we have a preconceived notion that we we're people and we're just like our customers, so we already understand it. So perhaps there's sometimes there can be that view that we don't need to do independent qualitative or quantitative research because we're already know it. If we're targeting younger people and your children at that age, well, we understand them because we've got our own children. There can be that almost a sense of we already understand because we are those people. But I guess the comfort is about thinking a bit wider because most executives or management have their own, I guess, biases. So it's been able to, research is about thinking beyond those biases and understanding how do we reimagine kind of what we're doing.
And I suppose also you mentioned this notion of change. You've mentioned that word several times. Obviously, with the clients that you deal with, they may have a product that's been selling quite well for a while, but suddenly it isn't selling as much as it used to. And that's where you come in to ask some hard questions about what has changed out in the marketplace and how they need to react to that.
Yeah, I think often it does start from either they're just starting to think about, they might have been referred on. They might have had it, say, a management consultant's been working with them. They haven't really used research a lot. And they're, much of the time when we're starting to work with a client, it's quite exploratory. I would call it exploratory research, where it's exploring the market, it's exploring their customers, and it's really starting to go, well, let's understand on a broad level. Let's understand their marketing. Let's understand what their competitors are doing. Let's understand whether it's brand awareness. Let's understand the category more. And then really starting to then dig into who's doing it well, who's doing it not. Are there current category rules that they could start to break? They could start to look at doing it differently because it might start meeting customer and potential customer needs better. So it's a lot of time that's kind of where it's starting, because they're thinking, well, we know we need to do some research. We're not quite aware of where to start. And it often is about starting a little bit wider to go, let's understand your customers and your market better, and then looking at how we can do this better moving forward.
Because I would imagine it's reasonably expensive because it takes, as you mentioned, phone calls, some time, understanding the market, asking the questions of the broader public, etc. So that's time consuming and expensive. Do you get pushback from smaller entrepreneurs who think, I know my business, I don't need market research, I don't need marketing, I'm doing okay, and they trip up as a result of that?
I think it's the perception of price, and I'm not going to go into give you my menu of prices, but I think, again, what I've really loved about research over my 30 or so years doing it, it's every client's a bit different. Like there are consistent methodologies and approaches we will take, but it's a lot of that discussion is around understanding where their needs are, and sometimes that might be budget or other restrictions. Sometimes they might have different markets, domestic or national or global, or different segments. So I guess I look at things like whether it's your accounting or your advertising budget or your new product development, they're all expensive. And I guess the role that research plays is ensuring you're not wasting your money. You're going in the right direction. You're aware of those realities. So it's certainly, it can be like, certainly big corporate brands, global brands would spend a huge amount on research, but at a small level, you just scale it back and you look at more simple approaches to doing that.
I remember doing some work for a PR company, and they had a big poster up on the wall that said, I think it was Bill Gates saying, if I was down to my last dollar, I'd spend it on market research. I'd spend it on marketing. That rings true, doesn't it? I mean, in terms of, the power to know what your audience is and, what they want of you. If you don't understand that, then you can be selling into a void.
We did some work last year for Johnny's Popcorn. They're a really great popcorn business that's they've only been going for about 12 years. And their, I think it was the operations director we were dealing with on that particular project, really, really great client, great opportunity, selling into Woolies and Coles. And at the end, he said he always thought that marketing was about advertising. Get your advertising right. You've got to get your advertising out there. And said he learned after going through the process with us of going, well, he's worked out that marketing is about understanding your market. So if you don't understand your market, there's no point trying to market to them because you're going to market wrong. You're going to miss the target. You're going to miss the target segments. You're not going to say the right thing. So to me, it's really research is about avoiding waste and being much more precise and clear and and confident in your innovation, in your marketing, in your strategy.
There's probably a truth in that when folks talk to me about research, I'd often say to smaller businesses or earlier stage entrepreneurs, and they're starting to think about the stuff, and you get some of that resistance occasionally, like, oh no, I built this from the kitchen table. I understand the customer. I understand the segment. Sometimes you see that in family businesses where, 3 generations or 4 generations back, something was started, and the older generations are hanging on to their firmly held beliefs from when the business started, and that doesn't reflect the customer reality today. Sometimes I'll say to them, look, in your personal capacity, if you're going to go and have solar put on your house, or you're going to go and buy a car, or you put your kids in, you want to put them in to think about which high school they're going to, you do a bit of homework, don't you? You'd, these days, jump on the internet and have a look at what the interest rates are, have a look at what properties are for sale in the area to get a sense of price points when you're buying a home. You may go for a tour of the school. Those are forms of research. You just happen to be doing them yourself.
Yeah.
And so, you're making those decisions on an informed basis or a more informed basis. And so to what degree do you think it would be invalid to bring in a specialist to help you understand a bit more about the customers that you service or the geographies that you service? The number of times I've seen entrepreneurs where they want to scale internationally, and they say, oh, no, we're going to go to hypothetically, we're going to go to the US. And then, so, oh, that's a good idea. Whereabouts in the US? Because Southern California's economy is the size of Australia's. I don't know, we're going to the US. So that's probably not a recipe for success, thing one. And then, have you got anybody in your leadership team or on your board who's done that before? No, I'm sure we'll work it out. Just a suggestion, maybe you should get somebody into your advice circle who's taken a business into the US or taken a business internationally before. Just because they've had that lived experience, and in some ways that becomes a one-person research proxy for, the things that you don't know. Yeah. And I guess when you talk about exploratory research, Jason, that's sort of the point. Like we don't know what we don't know.
That's right. And I do a lot of workshops with younger people and not so young people around what we do in research. And often they're not at the point where they're going to commission a large research study, but it is about thinking beyond themselves, being curious, as I've said before, but about getting outside of their head. And if it's a solo entrepreneur or even a partnership, they're inside their head. They're debating it. Sometimes it's almost like doing a focus group in your own mind, trying to work it out, and you're just spending so much time not getting anywhere because it's in your own mind. You're almost sort of confirmation bias. We're just confirming what you already know and looking and rolling it around and around and around. And the same thing when you get to organisations. Often the leadership's been employed from within that sector, so they're all rolling around the same ideas. They're doing a workshop just confirming what they already
always
knew.
Done it the same way.
Yeah, that's right. And it really is about stepping beyond that. And it doesn't need to be at full sort of survey focus group, massive kind of global scale research. It could be just, often the simplest thing is find 5, 10, 20 of your key stakeholders, experts in your sector, locally and globally, and speak to them. Speak to them for 45 minutes. A lot of the work we do is really just in-depth interviews with leaders in that space or key customers. And it's an amazing amount of depth you get out of those discussions. And even if the organisation, the client that we've got has a relationship with those key customers, they often have different conversations. It's often about sales. It's often about how's the wife and kids. So I think it's really about redefining what research is about.
So because you're a market researcher and you're employed to do that, you can come in and ask some other questions that these people have had this long established relationship would not ask.
Or they're not asking it. Yeah, that's right. We've got that expertise that's there, and we're exploring those questions. We're looking, we're searching with that mission of understanding those experts or those customers a bit more. And also I think the person on the other end or people on the other end of the interview, they want to share. They want to be open. They want to be candid. They want to be able to say things without fear or favour and not be identified. So I guess all of those things are really important. And I think that's it is about that exploring and having that internal value that this is important, that we want to always understand customers. We want to always understand what's going out in the broader market, but we're also open to new opportunities. We're always open to curiosity. And I think that's kind of the fundamental belief that is required in an organisation that would then go to that next step of starting to do more research internally or outsource to a group like ours.
Let's look at a few little case studies, because what I'm intrigued by also is this notion that nothing stays the same, and that's really where your value is in a large part. We look at, say, Wine Australia. I know you're doing some work with them. The Australian wine industry has a number of issues on the moment. One of the big ones is that the consumption of wine is declining, and sales overseas is also a bit of an issue, and there's changes in wine tasting habits. As strange as it is, people are turning away from Shiraz. I love a Shiraz, but there's a change in the marketplace. So tell us about the work that you do there to give Wine Australia a better read on the changing nature of their market and possibly what should be done to enhance it in future.
So we've just completed some work for Wine Australia, and the report's publicly available as I understand it. So I'm sure you can search for Wine Australia and on-premise and would likely come up, particularly if you put square holes at the end of that. And that research, as I understand it, not trying to, it's a client, it's Wine Australia, our client's research, was because there was a gap in information over the last 5 years or so. The data that was available was illustrating that wine consumption on premise, so in hospitality, in restaurants and pubs and clubs, was declining. And there was an opportunity to understand what's occurring better. So that's really where we were commissioned through a process, obviously going through a tender process, procurement process, we were selected, which was great. We were super pleased to have that opportunity. So, and that was a project that we did some survey work nationally. We did some focus groups. We did some bit of a twist on focus groups. We did some affinity groups in people's houses. We did some expert interviews. We did some ethnography in different. We did some of that online. We did some of that. We went to ethnography. We went walking around Sydney and Melbourne, popping into wine bars and restaurants and just observing. So getting paid to sit in a pub is a pretty
tough
good
work.
bit of research, tough work, but someone's got to do it. So, and I think what I like about a project like this is that, particularly over the last 5 years, even the last couple of years with the global kind of tightening, that a lot of industries are trying to survive and thrive in shrinking markets. And the role of research, like the wine research, is really going, well, rather than getting caught up with everybody knows what's happening, let's explore and see what is actually occurring. What's
and is there an independent source of truth?
That's
trying to create
exactly.
an independent source of truth.
That's right, and taking that more helicopter perspective of what's going, because like everybody has a view of, it's because of this, because wine consumption's down, or it's because people aren't drinking as often, or it's because of the cost of living crisis. We could probably name 5-10 different things. And I think it's one of the things that organisations often do. They'll jump onto one reason why something's occurring, but it might be that one reason, but there might be 5-10 other reasons. So,
did you get a bit of a read on what some?
Yeah, really, and I guess the thing that wine is still hugely strong. Like in on premise, it's still very popular. It's still got lots of consumers who see every occasion as a wine occasion. Wine Australia's got a great new campaign around occasions of wine and stretching that through. Wine and the experience of wine is key. As prices go up in a lot of businesses, hospitality, wine or otherwise, there's an expectation from the customer that we're paying more, so there should be an experience with it. So what are we getting? Do we get a wine? Do we get a cocktail? So, and there's a sense that maybe the price differential is not huge. So if we're going to pay, $18, $20 for a glass of wine, why don't we go to $23 or $25 for a cocktail? So there's lots of thinking in that of how do we, as a wine business, adjust to the new consumer. I think it's fascinating in that research of how the role that some wine companies just need to be really clear on their brand and how they sell into different venues that they sell into, or a different pub group or a different restaurant group, where others might want to be innovative. How do we innovate in our products so we're attracting emerging consumers? So spritzers or other products that maybe might not have been as much of a priority 10 or so years ago. So a lot of it, I guess, is, again, I come back to how do you survive and thrive in a shrinking market? And there's certainly in this project, there were lots of examples of hospitality and wine companies doing it really, really well, even if it is a tough market.
And in some cases, then, in my experience, it's not always a shrinking market. It's just a market that's growing less rapidly than what it used to.
Exactly.
And so, sometimes there's the perception that, because the pace of growth has slowed,
there's something wrong.
There's something wrong. And it may just be that, you've reached a certain saturation point in a given domain or whatever it is. There's echoes of this that remind me of my time when I was working to turn around a cinema business. And, you wind the clock back, let's say, late 80s, early 90s, there were precisely 3 ways to watch a film. You went and saw it at the movie house, or you waited about a year and a half, and it came out in a video store near you. Or you waited another year and a half and it came out on telly on one of the four or five channels that we had. And, you fast forward to trying to run a cinema operation in the 2010s, and there's streaming platforms and video stores are basically gone, particularly in the latter 2010s. And the nature of that whole environment's changed. And I recall having a conversation with somebody about the nature of movie going and so on, and the pivot and understanding that these venues are entertainment venues first and foremost. They happen to show films. There are lots of ways to consume a film. This is not the cheapest nor the most convenient. In fact, it's a very expensive and inconvenient way to watch a movie, but it's a better way to watch a movie because the screen's larger and you're having a communal experience with a bunch of other people. So when there's a gag on the screen and somebody's corpsing it with laughter, the funnies become funnier and the thrills become more thrilling. And so that starts to indicate a directionality for how you might build a cinema business that can thrive in a market that's deeply challenged by other ways and cheaper ways to consume films. If actually the differentiator now is entertainment, let's do more in the entertainment space. And that's when we started to see things like Gold Class and Kiddie Cinemas.
You have a wine while you're watching.
Large format screens, doubling down on the entertainment. So I think that to your point, sometimes the drivers are less well understood. So it's important to do the research to get at them, right?
That's right. And making that commitment over an extended period that's who we are as a business, that we are going to understand what's changing, that 2025 is quite different to 2015 or 2005. So things do change. So just being aware and part of that, and the changing role that a cinema or wine or a research company plays over time is evolving. That's really important, and not having and accepting that there are rules in categories and business, but maybe looking at how they might be shifting.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to bring up a classic South Australian company, because to me it's sort of like it really highlights, the role of a market research company in a changing environment. We look at Haigh's chocolates. It's a prestigious product here in South Australia. It's in our DNA. It's one of these things we all buy for different occasions or whatever. But it's a company going back more than a century, probably now in its fourth, fifth generation. So, we're talking about a whole range of different changes over a long, long period of time. You've been working with them, and they're about to go into a massive expansion, as I understand it, in the northern suburbs. They're a classic case in point, a family business with generations changing in a changing market, yet they've maintained this market. Tell us about the work that you do there. What are the questions you ask of the people out in the community about Haig's?
It's always, again, that's sort of a good example of, I think they'd done bits of research before we got involved more than a decade ago. I think the first bit of work was again, more exploratory piece of work. Part of that, we were sort of segmenting the chocolate categories. That's not a bad job to have to look at how the chocolate categories.
You have some hard gigs, shocking life.
But we did focus groups about chocolate, and we did.
You drink wine, you eat chocolate.
Yeah, but just sort of like that was so understanding their category and getting some benchmarks. So that was, I guess, a bigger piece of work. It wasn't a huge piece, but it was a reasonable sized work just to get an understanding of the the chocolate category and where do they fit, and that was certainly about specialty stores as well as the bigger chocolate brands that we all know in the grocery stores, etc. It was interesting, that early discussions with Haigh of understanding who they are and who they are not. And I think that's one of the things I really love about Haigh and many of these SME businesses that we work with, that they're very clear about who we are and who we're not. And yeah, we could be exactly like the category norm or that other brand that everybody might buy, but we're very clear about where we are. Like Haigh, so we don't sell in supermarkets. We're very clear about it. Everybody goes, oh, you know what my opportunity is for Haigh? They should sell in supermarkets. I go, well, but we don't do that. And there's different reasons why they don't do that. So certainly that initial bit of work was getting some benchmarks, understanding their category, where they sit in the world, understanding different segments, how can they grow. And over time, we've done some brand tracking. So we do brand tracking for Haigh to see how their brand is growing. They've expanded their network, their store network over time. So that's been around. They've got some KPIs. They've a few internal KPIs, and one of those comes from our work. We look at things like NPS as well in that project. So there's a whole lot of questions. We've been keeping that consistent over the time we've been working with Haigh, and we also have other projects when there's a need to explore different topics that might be more timely at that moment.
Would you help a business like Haigh or others do, I'd call it early stage validation of concepts or innovation or whatever before they go to market or before they make big committal decisions? Not necessarily for Haigh, but
we've certainly had, yeah, we do, and it really depends on that strategic need of that particular client. It's certainly Haigh, we've had different opportunities, not necessarily specific as that, but so we've got this priority. We're not quite sure how to achieve these strategic goals over the next 5-10 years. Let's get some research to path the best way forward or help to support there.
Because there's some of that where I talk about, when businesses are going to grow, and you're thinking about, in another podcast, we were chatting about diversification and adjacencies and those sorts of things. And the risk aversion that some folks have to charting out new territory, one of the ways that you can get a bit more comfortable with the decision-making process is to validate your thinking, to validate your ideas, and to get some research on the table that would help you map out a market sizing or a market demand or opportunity before you go and commit heavy dollars to capital equipment or new premises or whatever it is.
To find out.
So, it's kind of, I think there's also understanding, and I guess you sort of hit the nail on the head, Jason, you're talking about being curious, is trying to wire into your DNA, whether that's product or service innovation or market expansion or understanding what's happening in the alcohol consumption or trends or customer trends, consumer trends. There are all of these myriad roles where research can help unpack and give clarity in otherwise like having the curtains drawn back and you can see on the stage now what's going on. I think that's the critical part. And so many SMEs, in my experience, are probably underweight in the degree to which formally or informally they leverage research in their organizations. Would you say that's an accurate observation?
That's right. There's Donald Rumsfeld uses a line about you. There's the known knowns and then there's the unknown unknowns. So the things you don't know. So it's really bad. And that's sometimes the more broader research can discover things you didn't know that can actually help your business. But there's also those the known unknowns when you go, we just don't know. We don't know this. We're not sure. We're missing data. We're debating internally, and we're not getting to an end. And we've worked with a prominent cordial group that's based in SA that is now, as I understand it, Australia's number one cordial group. And they've had some questions over time around whether it's flavors or whether it's sugar base, and research has helped to kind of guide those decisions. And some of that's been really very simple, quick, cost-effective research, and other times it's been a bit more expansive. So I think it's really understanding how do we get clarity in those questions that we've got that we don't feel confident enough that internally we're making those right decisions, or we've got those, we're push and pull, but how do you kind of drive forward?
And I guess the balancing act of, speak for myself personally, when I've engaged with third-party research crowds in organizations I've run, is to be really clear on the research component is to help understand and unpack stuff, and we must take it for those findings at face value. It's still our job in the organization to then translate those findings into what's commercially applicable or what you want to use to drive your business forward, or to, work out what's feasible.
Yeah.
So you don't let go of control necessarily of what the business decision is, but you make a much more informed business decision.
Yeah,
that's right.
And, I have seen it before where some people are like, they delegate responsibility entirely to the researcher and say, well, Jason, you must solve this problem for me. Well, no, it's still your business problem. What I will do is surface a landscape for you that maybe you were or weren't aware of, and then you must make of that what you will, and to diagnose which of those things are important to what degree.
That's right. It's about illuminating the future, not going, it has to be this way. I think, and that, you've got your strategy, you've got your vision, you've got your research, and that all comes together to provide some clarity about what the best direction might be. But you're just not moving forward with bold or seemingly stupid ideas that are destined to fail. You're at least aware of what you're going to be
I've had a
facing.
few of those over the years. I laugh nervously and change the subject.
So Jason, what would you say to a young South Australian entrepreneur who, is growing the business, cash flow is always an issue, and weighing up the notion about whether they should spend some money on market research? How would you convince them that, this could be fundamental to their success?
I think it'd start with that sense of curiosity and with their customers and their broader market, and how do they do that? And is that part of who they are as an organisation, that they're not inward focused and just repeating category norms? Are they curious? Are they aware?
I dare say if they've asked you to do the job, it's an indication that they do have a curiosity. Yeah,
that's right. I guess, and a lot of our challenge could be that organisations that maybe aren't reaching out. But I think it's just having that conversation. Really, I think the first step is to go, we don't know where to start. We feel like there's some opportunity for some research for us to be more aware of our customers or our market opportunities, or to look at ways to innovate. I think it's often I'd say consistently across many of our projects that are quite different. That idea of looking at things differently and innovating, moving forward is really key. And where are those paths to growth? Do we go, as Ryan said before, into the US? Do you go into this market in the US, or you go into this market? We've had clients we've looked at, say, the US and the UK. Do we go into the UK, or do we go? What do we do first? So it's setting those priorities. It's having those discussions, and it's being quite transparent around what are we looking to explore, what's the outcome we're looking to achieve. What do we know we don't know, and what do we not? What do we want to explore a bit further? And just having that discussion. I think it's really not. If at the end of the day, if they start exploring research and ends up not fitting into their budget or their priorities, then don't do it. But if it's just at least having those discussions. And there's certainly, I'd be silly to our disruption in our industry is about DIY and the biggest trend, whether it's advertising and branding or whether it's research, is setting up an in-house team. So I guess the opportunity might be about setting up something internally. It might be having an external provider like ours. It might be kind of how do we work through those two. So it's really having conversations, whether it's ourselves or another research company, about having those conversations around where might research fit to help us, and then making your own decision.
Well, if you need some market researchers for chocolate or Shiraz or whatever, we're your men, aren't we, Ryan?
Yeah, 100% right.
It has been fascinating.
Actually, also tourism, right?
And tourism.
I'd be happily researching.
We'll look at
tourism.
your client base and we'll sort of cherry pick what we want to do. But it has been fantastic talking to you and getting an insight into the need for market research. Thank you very much today.
Right. No, and it's just, I think anyone that's watched focus groups, it is fun. Like people say the funniest thing, and I talk about wine and chocolate, but some people go, every occasion's a wine or chocolate occasion. So we don't need to, I think both of those sectors don't have to really worry about their future if they've got research. Yeah.
Thank you very
much.
Jason.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for your company today. If you'd like more information about the issues raised in this podcast or other related topics, please visit our website at www.centreforbusinessgrowth.com. And a quick reminder that you can always tune into the Growth Trust podcast on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. Bye for now.